Nothing is happening. At least that's what it looks like. You've been showing up. You've been working. You've been trying. And somehow it feels like you're standing in exactly the same place. The project isn't growing. The results aren't obvious. The progress isn't visible. You keep putting effort in, and reality keeps giving you silence. That is one of the most frustrating phases of any meaningful goal. Not because you're failing, because you can't tell whether you're succeeding. If things were obviously getting worse, at least the situation would be clear. If things were obviously getting better, that would be even better. But instead, you end up in a strange middle ground. You work. You wait. You look around. And nothing seems different. Most people assume this means something is wrong. Maybe the plan isn't working. Maybe the goal isn't realistic. Maybe the effort isn't enough. Maybe they're wasting their time. Sometimes that's true, but not nearly as often as people think. Because one of the strangest things about progress is that it rarely feels like progress while it's happening. People expect change to be visible. They expect movement to feel dramatic. They expect effort and results to arrive close together. Real life doesn't work that way. Think about learning a language. You study for weeks. You learn vocabulary. You review grammar. You practice listening. And for a long time, it feels like nothing is happening. Then one day you hear a sentence and understand it without translating. The improvement didn't appear that day. It was building long before you noticed it. The same thing happens in the gym. Nobody sees results after a few workouts. You lift weights. You go home. You come back. You repeat the process. For weeks, the mirror barely changes. Then one day you notice your clothes fit differently. Again, the progress didn't begin that morning. It was happening the entire time. You just couldn't see it. The problem is that people trust visible progress more than invisible progress. And visible progress is often the last thing to arrive. The effort comes first. The results come later. Sometimes much later. The difficult part is that progress and feedback rarely move at the same speed. The work happens today. The evidence often arrives later. And in that gap, it's very easy to convince yourself that your effort isn't working. That delay creates a dangerous illusion. You start believing that nothing is happening, when in reality, a lot is happening. You just don't have access to it yet. Most meaningful goals spend a surprisingly long time underground. A tree doesn't appear the day the seed is planted. A building doesn't appear when the foundation is poured. And a skill doesn't appear the day you decide to learn it. For a while, the work happens in places you can't see. The frustrating part is that your brain hates this. Your brain wants evidence. It wants proof. It wants feedback. It wants reassurance that the effort is worth it. When that reassurance doesn't arrive, doubt moves in. And doubt starts asking questions. Is this working? Am I wasting my time? Should I try something else? Should I quit? Those questions become especially dangerous when you're doing everything correctly. Because if you're making obvious mistakes, the solution is simple. Fix the mistake. But when you're doing the right things and still not seeing results, the temptation to abandon the process becomes much stronger. Not because the work stopped working, because the results haven't caught up yet. This is where many people leave. Not at the beginning. Not during failure. During the invisible phase. The phase where effort exists but evidence doesn't. The phase where you're improving but can't measure it. The phase where nothing seems to be happening. And that's unfortunate, because the invisible phase is often much closer to progress than people realize. Think about how people describe success. They usually talk about the moment something changed. The first customer. The first opportunity. The first promotion. The first 1,000 subscribers. The first breakthrough. What they rarely talk about are the months before it happened. The repetitive work. The boring days. The uncertainty. The period where every day looked identical. Those days disappear from the story, but they're usually where the story was built. The breakthrough gets remembered. The preparation gets forgotten. That creates another illusion. People see the visible result. They don't see the invisible accumulation. They see the moment. They don't see the years that made the moment possible. And because of that, many people expect progress to look faster than it actually does. They underestimate how long things can remain invisible. One of the most useful things you can learn is that progress and evidence are not the same thing. Progress can exist without evidence, at least for a while. You can be getting better before you feel better. You can be getting stronger before you look stronger. You can be getting closer before it looks like you're moving. The absence of visible results is not always the absence of progress. Sometimes it's just the absence of proof. And those are very different things. The difficult part is continuing when proof hasn't arrived yet. Because continuing is easy when results are obvious. Anyone can stay motivated when everything is working. The real challenge is staying in motion when reality is quiet, when nobody notices, when nobody congratulates you, when there are no milestones to celebrate, when the effort looks exactly the same as yesterday, and the day before that, and the week before that. That is where patience stops being an abstract virtue and becomes a practical skill. Not the patience to sit around and wait. The patience to keep working while the results are still invisible. Because eventually something interesting happens. The invisible work starts becoming visible. The language starts making sense. The habit starts feeling natural. The project starts moving. The audience starts growing. The opportunities start appearing. And from the outside, it looks sudden. People love the word suddenly. Suddenly successful. Suddenly confident. Suddenly growing. Suddenly discovered. But most sudden changes are not sudden at all. They're the visible result of a long, invisible process. That's why one of the biggest mistakes you can make is assuming that nothing is happening simply because you can't see it yet. Sometimes nothing is happening, but often something is growing beneath the surface. Progress is accumulating. Momentum is building quietly in the background. The danger is quitting before you give it a chance to become visible. Because if you leave during the invisible phase, you'll never know how close you were. Nothing is happening. At least that's what it looks like. But appearances can be misleading, especially when it comes to progress. The most important changes in your life will often be invisible before they become obvious. And the people who eventually get results are usually not the people who avoid that phase. They're the people who survive it.